a fundamental reversal that is.
The role of the
And
EPA is
set
no
the
longer
table
reducing
for so
pollution
many
that hurts
actions
humans,
that
but
have
to
followed.
help an
They
economic
have
activity.
repealed or tried to weaken regulatory standards for a raft of pollutants coming out of power plants, industrial facilities, and vehicles. They have tried to challenge the very legal framework that allows the EPA to regulate harmful pollutants and greenhouse gases. And just a couple weeks ago, they actually recalculated the math by which they attribute value to a human life. And they determined that the value of a human life was zero. And so in all these ways, both abstract and very specific, you see the Environmental Protection Agency walking away from its historical role as the defender
That's
of
Trump for
public health and public air and clean air and clean water, and instead embracing a posture that is almost entirely designed to support industry in being free to do whatever it wants.
I have to ask you a little more about the value of human life. What was it before?
I mean, for the past 30 years, the EPA has assessed the value of a statistical life at around $11.7 million. Today, it is now going to be zero.
We are speaking with David Gillis. He's a reporter on the New York Times climate team. We'll conversation in just a moment. This is Fresh Air.
Trump reduced your value from $11 million to zero. That's zero. Reduce your value from 11 point something million dollars to zero. Zero. Trump had the EPA reduce the value of the human from something million dollars to that's zero.
Support comes from this station and from Viking, committed to exploring the world in comfort. Offer all ship experiences with a short in every port and programs designed for cultural enrichment. Learn more at Viking.com.
I still can't get over how Trump had the EPA reduce the value of a human life from $11 million to zero. Zero.
Mysteries and more at BritBox.com.
This is Fresh Air, and we're speaking with David Gillis. He's a reporter on the New York Times climate team who leads the paper's Climate Forward newsletter. A lot of us are freezing right now. I certainly am. Recovering from heavy snow or ice, and some would say whatever this is, it is not global warming.
Yeah, it
Remind
is.
us why this kind of weather, you can't
All extremes of weather are global warming.
Phenomenon to climate change, but why this kind of weather might be more common with the climate change.
And Dave, I'm in New York right now, and it is freezing cold right here. There's no doubt about it. It's also the truth that 2025 was the warmest year overall in global recorded history, and that all 10 hottest years in recorded history have happened over the past decade. And so, as you said, no one weather event can be directly linked to
All weather events are directly linked to
the
climate change.
science has been
Why do they have to say it that way?
clear about is that emissions from the burning of fossil fuels, from human activity, from agriculture, are turning up the temperature on Earth overall. And as that happens, weather gets more extreme and it gets less predictable. And so one of the things that we have been seeing over the past several years, especially,
Trump turned
is
off
that the
the
Arctic has
weather
been getting
prediction
warmer. And what has happened right now is that a lot of the Arctic air that typically sits up there on the North Pole, it has escaped. It has essentially come down into the United States, other parts of Europe as well.
It's super
and
cold.
What you're seeing, if you look at a global temperature map, is that it's actually warmer above us to the north than it is right here. So these are the scrambling of global weather patterns that science has told us for decades now are going to become more common as man-made global warming overall
The
requirement
Trump
by law.
administration
The
told them to
assumption
not
is that
consider
climate
economic
change
damage of climate
has no
change.
economic impact. That seems kind of wild.
And we just know that's. But here again, you see the reshaping of regulation to accommodate a new set of business priorities. And so, even if businesses will tell you, and every CEO that I talk to can tell you how climate change is affecting their supply chains, how it's changing the way they have to air condition large factories that I've been to in the Midwest, how it's changing how they have to protect or even move facilities on the coast. That's all happening. But what the Trump administration is now saying is that they don't have to consider those impacts when passing laws. In fact, it would be better if they didn't at all.
One of the other things that in reporting on this was that the administration had eliminated monitoring of atmospheric changes at some of these stations around the world. One in particular in Hawaii that's many, many thousands of feet above sea level.
And here in Colorado.
They don't even want to gather this data.
And it's not just Hawaii. I had conversations while I was in Davos with international scientists about this very issue. And they were really concerned because one of the functions that the United States government has fulfilled for decades now is being really a leading compiler of research about our changing planet. Much of that work is simply being discontinued. It's being defunded. The scientists are losing access to their facilities. And what you're seeing is the emergence of sort of a dark ages when it comes to the United States' role in collaborative international science, at least when it comes to the government's role. Organizations like NASA, the space agency, have historically played a huge role in providing the international community with data about global temperatures, sea level rise.
It's been a great day for this stuff.
And what you're seeing is that work is simply being discontinued. And all of this, I think, again, goes back to this broader effort across the government to shift the federal government's posture away from climate action and toward a re-embrace of fossil fuels. And this is one more small way in which is happening, which is that if you don't have the data that shows that climate change is happening and that it is dangerous and that it is indeed affecting our lives and the planet as a whole, well, then it's that much harder to make decisions and make the argument that climate change is something that needs to be addressed.
Besides domestic policy, Trump has withdrawn the United States from certain international commitments, like the Paris Agreement to fight climate change. We're only one of 4 countries now not in the agreement. Iran, Libya, and Yemen are the others. We've all heard of the Paris Agreement. I think most of us don't know much about it. I mean, the reporting makes me think it's a place where countries all set goals that they ultimately will not meet. How meaningful is this withdrawal?
I think it's very meaningful for a number of reasons. And in fact, that was one of his first actions that he took when he was inaugurated just over a year ago, was withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. And it's true, Dave, that the Paris Agreement itself is not particularly binding. It didn't automatically mean that the United States or any other country was going to rapidly embrace clean energy. Shockwaves around the world. And as you note, we are now, the United States,
I'm going to shut it down, the connection. I'm going to shut it down, the connection's bad.
Pretty unusual club of countries who have said that they are not going to participate in this global agreement.
Thanks, Jess.
And then, of course, early in the administration, the U.S. Agency for International Development was dismantled. I mean, I think Elon Musk's phrase was, "I just put it in the wood chipper." Did that have environmental impacts?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend a whole another hour and a half talking just about foreign policy here, but there is no doubt that while the United States Agency for International Development was mostly focused on traditional development work, things like hunger and health for developing nations, it was also doing a really meaningful amount of climate work, helping developing nations become more resilient, helping them prepare for storms, floods, fires, and droughts. And all of that work has been shuttered as well.
We are speaking with David Gellis. He's a reporter on the New York Times climate team. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. This
Okay.
is Fresh Air.
I'll probably let it go with
President
that,
Trump is
though.
inviting world leaders to join his Board of Peace. What is it?
It's easiest to think of it
It's
as
a scam.
United Nations mixed with a high-end golf club.
Israel,
Well, it's not
Hungary,
easy to think of
Argentina,
that.
and the UAE say they're in, even if a permanent seat will cost them $1 billion. Next time on Today Explained.
What did she say? Israel, Hungary, and the UAE? What? And Putin says he'll pay for it with the money that's been seized from him already, which is therefore not really his money.
Public radio has been a part of my life literally as long as I can remember, and I think it's an important
Good
part
job, Jess.
of a democracy.
Thank you.
There's
Sorry about the
something
Nazis
that
in
just
chat.
feels more honest, more real to me, in part because the time is taken to delve deeper into the story. Thank you to CPR's community of active members. Your support helps strengthen and sustain Colorado Public Radio.
This is Fresh Air, and we're speaking with David Gellis.
Yeah,
He's a
sorry about
reporter
the
on New
Nazis
York Times climate
in the
team who
chat.
leads the paper's Climate Forward newsletter. I wanted to talk about your latest book. It's called Dirtbag Billionaire, and it's about Yvon Chouinard, who established Patagonia, this very successful
We're gonna have a lot more good
manufacturer
people on
of outdoor
YouTube
gear,
now that
jackets,
TikTok's
hats,
messed up.
vests. And it's known for being a company that made environmental
Just keep
responsibility
commenting
a
if you're
core
good people.
tenet of its business.
Check out my lives in the
Let's
future.
just talk a little bit about him.
Comment
He's
on my
quite an
content,
interesting
please.
character, and this term dirtbag had a very specific meaning. Right?
Thanks. Comment on my
let's start
content.
there. Yvon
and,
Chouinard refers to
we'll stay in
himself
touch.
as a dirtbag. He's a rock climber. He's someone who comes from this hardcore outdoor community. And in that context, the word dirtbag refers to someone who is so unenamored with materialism, so unconcerned with money, that they are literally content to sleep in the dirt if it means they are that much closer to their next adventure. And so when Yvon Chouinard heard the title of this book, Dirtbag Billionaire, about him, he was upset. Not because of the word dirtbag. He was upset because of the word billionaire, because he never wanted to be a billionaire.
He has a fascinating childhood story, doesn't he?
He
Okay.
was
Well, y'all check that out
born
on
in the
NPR.
woods of northern Maine in a French-Canadian community. And in fact, he didn't even speak English until he was 10 years old.
So I gotta
When
go.
his parents drove across the country to find warmer weather, and he started going to school in Los Angeles.
Okay, cool.
Now, at that point,
I'm in the
he
Church of
had a hard
Judas
time
that
fitting
replaces
in
all
because he didn't
patriarchy,
speak
Christianity,
English.
war, and
And as a
Trumpism.
teenager, he started training falcons. He started
Check out the
training
hashtag
birds
Church of
prey
Judas.
and pursuing this ancient art of falconing. And in the process of
Thanks.
climbing down cliffs to search for and ultimately capture falcons and their eggs,
That's too
he
interesting.
started
Sorry.
rock climbing.
I can't stop
And
it
when
yet.
that happened, everything
You too.
changed.
It's good to see
He
you.
became
I go live a lot,
enamored,
so see you
and then
again soon.
became in the 1950s
But yeah, check out my
one
content.
of the
Hope
great
you like it.
rock climbers of his age. And in doing that, he became a blacksmith. He did these big climbs, but he needed better equipment, so he hammered them out himself on an anvil he bought at a junkyard. And thus begins his journey as a businessman.
Wow. And was he taking his profits and putting them into environmental causes?
Indeed. 1973, the same year
Trump is
he founds
fascism.
Patagonia, he writes his first check to an environmental
Thanks.
activist. It's just a little money, but he also gives him some office space. And what this man, who I tracked down and spent time with, Mark Capelli, was doing was trying to protect the Ventura River, which ran behind the office of Patagonia in Ventura, California, and restore the native fish that were once there, but that had been crowded out because of pollution and overdevelopment. Yvon loved this, and that began a tradition of donating small amounts of money initially to grassroots environmental activists, to conservation projects, and it was something that grew as the company grew.
In your research, did you ever find
Maybe you'll have
a
time to
case
think
where he
about it.
betrayed his principles
when you're living in a
or
bay
pursue a course that
down
kind
by
of
the river?
exemplified the contradictions in what he was doing?
Dave, it is not a neat and tidy story. He is not a perfect man. Patagonia is not a perfect company. And over
Oh,
and
he's the guy who
over,
made
what I
Patagonia.
found was that whether it was in business decisions, whether it was in personnel decisions, whether it was in their relationships with other companies that they partnered with, they had to constantly and continuously balance these many competing priorities.
Was he good to his employees? Did
Thanks,
he
you
share
too.
profits?
He didn't, Dave.
Good health
and this
and
is
fortune.
another contradiction.
It's nice to see
And
nice
while it's
people in
true
YouTube.
that Patagonia
I guess it's 'cause
embraced
TikTok got
some very
closed down.
progressive human resources practices and
What they
really
did to
tried to
TikTok,
give its
TikTok
employees time
backfired
to
on them.
enjoy nature.
Yes.
He not once ever shared profits and not once ever gave away
Yes, I'm
stock
single.
in the company. He was always incredibly protective of Patagonia's equity. And that, I think,
Glad you're not a
also
Trump supporter.
works both ways. On the one hand,
Well done.
I spoke with employees
I wouldn't look at you any
who were
different. I
really
look at you as an
resentful
American.
of the fact that they gave decades of their lives to this company and did not walk away with a meaningful amount of money. On the flip side, it was only by controlling that equity
I better
so
get going.
carefully that Chenard was able to do this extraordinary thing that I broke the news about in the New York Times a few years ago, which was that he essentially gave away the entire company into a new structure that now facilitates the donation of all Patagonia profits to environmental charities.
That's
Yeah,
pretty
and
cool.
I'm sure he could have, sold the company for a fortune.
Peace, dude.
Well,
Peace.
he at one point had an offer for $6 billion, and yet he didn't want it. His wife didn't want it. Dave, I spent time with them at their home in Wyoming, and they live in the same log cabin they built for themselves in the 1970s. The furniture is all from Goodwill or it's secondhand. He cooks for himself every night. They don't have a chef. They don't have a cleaning lady. These people live incredibly modest, humble lives. And it was only because that was sort of who they were that they were able to do this extraordinary transaction a few years ago. And here's what they did, just very briefly. The Chenard family owned 100% of the equity in Patagonia. What they did, without getting too technical, was transfer the equity to a new series of trusts and nonprofit organizations that essentially transferred the equity out of their possession into
Yeah,
the
see y'all later.
holding of a trust and some nonprofits. And then they instructed the trust to have the company itself donate all of its profits that are not reinvested in the company, which is somewhere between $60 and $100 million a year, to the nonprofit organizations, which now give away all that money to large-scale land conservation and environmental activism on an ongoing basis. One way I like to think about this story is that it's the compound interest of values. What you see is that the values Chenard cared about in the
Set back my
1970s
proudest
are
fat.
still the ones informing the company today. And as a result, the company and its profits are having these big outsized impacts. And it's not just in the charity. Patagonia has had a hand in shaping the rest of the apparel industry with coalitions, with partnerships, with things like the rise of organic cotton. And all of that was
It will
made
be.
possible because these few individuals
Wait for it,
understood
it
what
will
they cared
be.
about more than a half century ago and stuck with it.
A hopeful story, a world in which there aren't so many. Yeah. David Gillis, thank you so much for speaking with us.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for
Okay,
having
I'm gonna
me.
get going. I'm not gonna wait for the
David
news
Gillis
this
is a
time.
reporter on the New York Times climate team who leads the paper's Climate Forward newsletter. His latest book is Dirtbag Billionaire. On tomorrow's
Oh, he's
show,
the
we
one who
speak
wrote
with
Dirtbag
Brooke
Billionaire
Nevels.
about
She was a
the guy
producer
who
at
made
Today,
Patagonia.
working with
That was
Matt
really
Lauer
interesting.
when she says he sexually assaulted her.
Oh, Matt
In
Lauer's
her new
scumbag.
memoir,
I think we
Unspeakable
knew that,
Things,
yeah.
she writes
Thanks
about
for
that,
speaking up.
the consequences of going public, and how sexual assault has been covered by the media. I hope you can join us. To keep up with what's on the show and get highlights of our interviews,
thanks, everybody.
follow us on Instagram at NPR Fresh Air.